I'm Jim Johnson. I serve the seminary as staff musician, but also as the event planner for the Stewardship Symposium each year. We are part of the College of Theology of Lenore-Rhine University, and that college has 3 different campuses in Hickory, the main campus of Lenore-Rhine, in Asheville, graduate studies, and here in Columbia in graduate studies. And our programs have expanded tremendously in the last several years. That we're now offering a Master of Occupational Therapy degree in a brand new building, a health sciences building across Main Street. And we have a Master of Human Services and Master of Counseling degrees, in addition to the degrees the seminary offers. Restrooms are located in the lobby here, in the Branham Conference Center entrance, in the lower level of the Student Union, which is adjacent to Reinhardt's Hall, where we'll have lunch. So if you have those needs, those are the locations. This would be a good time to check your devices that squeak and moan and groan and beep, and put them in a position where they may not do that. Our presenter today has asked that we bring Bibles, and we put that into our reminders. Some of you have devices for which there are Bible access. Some of you brought paper Bibles, but if you do not have either, if you could raise your hand, we have some that we will pass out to you. And if I could implore you to bring them back to this corner of the table on your way out. These are not part of the free book things that we're offering. Because if I don't get them back to Good Shepherd Lutheran Church, my interim position could be in jeopardy. You have an evaluation form in your folder, and we will have a box on the registration table to receive those at the conclusion of today's event. Please know that they're very important and they help the planning team evaluate how things were in each of our symposiums, and gives us a lot of ideas for future symposiums. We have a new staff person who is here in a capacity of financial coach and financial planner. And Robert Walker, where are you? I just wanted to introduce him, because he is available to students or alumni at no cost to either, for any kind of financial coaching or financial planning services that you might need. So thank you for being here, Robert. Lunch will be served in Reinhardt's Hall, which is underneath the chapel. You can access that through the chapel lobby and down the stairs, or just outside going down the concrete steps. And if we probably take both routes, it might help speed up the process of picking up a lunch. There were 4 requests for vegetarian meals, and those boxes have the names of those people on them, so please be sure you don't accidentally pick up one of the vegetarian meals if you did not order that. I would like to invite our seminarian Christopher Gerardo to offer an opening prayer.
The Lord be with you. Let's pray. God, creator and giver of all things, you call us into relationship with one another, with creation, and with you. Through Jesus, we have been set free, and through the Spirit, we have been empowered to live into this calling. Give us open minds and willing spirits to learn and discern how we, as your children, can use what you have first given us to make your kingdom come. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Now I invite Dr. Susan McCarver, a professor, to come forward and introduce our presenter today.
It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Marty Stevens to you today formally. Many of you know Dr. Stevens, but if you don't, she is a graduate of the University of North Carolina at Charlotte with a degree in finance and accounting, and also a graduate of this institution, LTSS, with an MDiv degree and a PhD degree in biblical studies from Union Theological Seminary in Richmond. She served as pastor of St. John's Lutheran Church in Salisbury, North Carolina for a number of years where she reinvigorated their education program, and she has done many symposiums like this for lay people. She has the distinction of having taught at Union Seminary, at this seminary, and at Gettysburg Seminary for a number of years as well. She's also a contributor to this volume, How Much Is Enough, which some of you have received or will have the opportunity to receive. She is the author of Chapter 6 in this book, which is entitled, well, I had it. I'm going to take my book out. A Well-Formed Stewardship Leader Embraces Financial Health as an Expression of Faith. So you will have an opportunity to get this book later if you don't already have it. On a more personal note, Dr. Stevens is a former colleague of mine here at Southern Seminary, where she served in a number of important capacities, not least of which was her important role in the development of Smith Family Village, one of our residential student housing facilities. Personally, I still miss her wit, her energy, she laughs hysterically over here, and her extreme competence in everything she puts her hand to. And I know that you will enjoy having some time with her today. It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Stevens back to our campus.
Thank you, Susan. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
As you heard, I have a PhD in biblical studies, specializing in Old Testament. So I come to this stewardship task sort of by a roundabout endeavor. I have a degree in accounting, as you heard, from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. And so I was a CPA for years, working in financial management. And when I was senior vice president of a bank in Charlotte, I decided I wanted to go to seminary. Now that's weird, I know. If we had all morning, I could tell you that story. But anyway, so after I got my PhD and began teaching in biblical studies, then when I went to Gettysburg Seminary in 2006 to teach in biblical studies and be the registrar, the stewardship professor was retiring. So they needed, stewardship was a required course at Gettysburg, so they needed someone to teach stewardship. So they thought, oh, well, here's somebody who is a CPA, and here we go. You can teach stewardship. Well, at the time, I really knew nothing more about stewardship than y'all do. But it evolved over the years. One of my sabbaticals I spent learning a lot about stewardship. So now that's primarily what I'm known for, not so much biblical studies, but biblical scholarship, biblical stewardship. I'll put that adjective in front of it. I'm a word nerd. I love words. Anybody out there a word nerd? I love words. I love how they work. I love what they're related to, what they mean, all kinds of things about words. So I want to start today with the word stewardship. Here we go, 3rd grade. What part of speech is the word stewardship? Noun, right? Noun. People, place, and things. Remember that from 3rd grade? Yeah. So, stewardship. Okay, now it turns out in English, we can form nouns in all kinds of different ways. We can put the ending, don't watch that, watch me. We can put the ending M-E-N-T, right, on something, and that makes it a noun. Like what, for example? Establishment. Investment, employment, nourishment. No one wants to say government, right? Right, so putting M-E-N-T is one way to make a noun. Another way is to put T-I-O-N on the end of a word, like action, addition, oh, salvation. This is a seminary, isn't it? Salvation, administration, right? There's all kinds of words that end in T-I-O-N. Well, it turns out another way to make a noun is to put S-H-I-P on the end. S-H-I-P. And that actually means something. These M-E-N-T or T-I-O-N or S-H-I-P actually mean something. They're not just random. We don't call it stewardment, right? We don't call it stewardshun. It's called, right? It's called stewardship, and it turns out there's actually a meaning in that. You can tell already, let me just stop for a second. This is a timeout. First of all, I move around a lot. I warned the video guy, but I move around a lot. Secondly, I call my style controlled interactive. I'm controlling the agenda and the time. I'm watching the time. We're going to have a break about 11:15 or so don't worry about that. But if you need to take care of yourself before then, feel free. But this doesn't work unless you're interactive with me. I'm not here to just talk for 2 hours, okay? Is that a deal? So you have to be ready to respond and just yell out or use the microphones or whatever works for you. Okay, now we're back in. We're out of that parentheses. Okay, ship. It turns out that means something. And the first thing it means is a condition or a state of being. It has to do with being. And the parade example of that is the word partnership, right? A partnership is a state of being a partner, right? It'd be hard to define it any other way. It's the process of being a partner is what we call a partnership. Or relationship, right? The partner, the process, the condition of being in relation with someone is relationship. The second thing is the suffix ship carries with it a certain expectation of quality. Bless you. So the parade example of that is the word craftsmanship. Craftsmanship. Now, if you go to a furniture store and someone talks to you about craftsmanship, right, what do you expect? Well done, high quality. It's not just slapped together with veneer or whatever, right? It's high quality. So there's a certain expectation of quality with the word that has ship on the end of it. And the third thing is that it's used with words that connote a rank or office, a certain authority, we could say. So words like ambassadorship, right? There's a certain authority that comes along with that. We don't call it ambassadorment or ambassadorship, right? It's ambassadorship. So a condition of being, an expectation of quality, and a certain authority or office or rank that comes with the word ship. Now, in seminaries, many of you have been to one, we talk a lot about internship. And people, of course, second-year students always want to know what is it, what is internship, what is it about? And it's really hard to define, isn't it? But how many people have been on an internship? A lot of you. How would you define an internship, right? You can name all the tasks. Well, you do this, you do that, you do the other. But the truth of it is, an internship is the process of living like an intern. Does that make any sense to you? The process of living like an intern. I couldn't tell if that made sense to you or not. So if that's true, stewardship then, there you go. See, you don't need me here at all. The process of living like a steward. That's really what stewardship is. The process of living like a steward. So then the question becomes, if we understand the qualities of the suffix ship, then the question becomes, what is a steward? That's the next thing to explore. What is a steward? Comes from two different Old English words put together. Ward is sort of a keeper, a hall keeper. And sty is not the pigsty. That's a great little story, and it helps, it's a great story to tell people, but it's not true. But that's okay. I mean, you can still use it. But it's from the Old English word sty, which is estate. So the estate keeper, or the hall keeper. So stewardship is the process of living like a steward. It's a state of being. It's not something we can list as a bunch of actions. It's a process of who we are, the process of becoming who we are. There's a certain quality that comes with stewardship, a certain expectation of quality, and there's a certain authority that comes with being the steward, as we're going to see. So what I want to do with you first is to go through the uses in the New Testament of the word stewardship and steward. So first we have to remember our Greek. I'm going to do it in English. Oikonomia is the Greek word that gets translated stewardship, okay? So it's two words put together. Even you who haven't had Greek in a long time would recognize what this word is, if I put an S on the end. House, good. And nomia is related to nomos, law, but it's not law, it's management. So oikos can be the house or the household. So what we have is management of the household. Management of the household. That's oikonomia, or stewardship. We're going to see that's maybe not the best word for it, but oikonomia, household management. And the person who does this task is the oikonom, make sure what language I'm in, the oikonomos, right? But you see the same kind of basic word there. So this is the person, and this is the process of household management. You with me so far? Yeah. Are you glad you came? Okay. Too late now, it's too obvious to walk out, so you have to stay. All right, so now we need your Bibles. Everybody needs to have access to a Bible. And we're going to spend about the next hour looking at the New Testament uses of oikonomia and oikonomos. And we're going to start with Luke 12. (39 to 44). I have a handout of this that I will give you later this afternoon, but I don't want you to have it now because you'll read ahead. I know how this works. So this is my controlling part of Controlled Interactive. I'm controlling that you don't read ahead. Okay, Luke 12, 39 to 44. Wait, let me get mine out. Luke. Let's see, this is all in the New Testament, right? Luke 12, 39 to 44. Okay, now what we're going to do is I'm going to ask somebody to read this, somebody near a microphone, so we can all hear and follow along. And you're looking for the word or words that would be, in Greek, underneath this English, would be oikonomia, stewardship, right, the process, the noun, or oikonomos, the person, the steward. That's what you're looking for. And every one of these texts we're going to go over have one or more of those instances. Okay?
Dr. Stevens, if you want to use the microphone, please press the little face that has the lines coming out of it, and then you'll have a microphone.
Did you hear what she said? If you want to use the microphone, press the little thing that has lines coming out of it.
It has a mouth and lines coming out.
Mouth and lines coming out of it. So who would like to be our first reader? It's a real honor to be the first reader in a okay, back here in the red sweater. Yeah. I don't see your mic. Is it on?
The little mouth with the lines. There isn't on.
There is no mouth with lines. There we go.
Okay, good enough, okay. But know this, if the owner of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have let his house be broken into. You also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour. Peter said, Lord, are you telling this parable for us or for everyone? And the Lord said, who then is the faithful and the prudent manager, when his master will put in charge of his slaves to give them their allowance of food at the proper time? Blessed is that slave whom his master will find at work when he arrives. Truly I tell you, he will put that one in charge of all his possessions.
Okay, what word do you think in there is why I chose this passage? Manager, the word manager here. So, who then, let's see now. Who then is the faithful and prudent manager whom his master will put in charge of his slaves to give them their allowance of food at the proper time? In verse 42. So manager is the word oikonomos. Now what can we learn about this manager from this little short snippet? What about this manager?
He's prudent. Faithful.
Okay, he's faithful.
Prudent.
Prudent, what does that mean? Wise, yeah, good. Discerning, right? Has good judgment. That's what it means to be prudent. Faithful, what does that mean in this context, do you think?
Trustworthy.
Loyal to whom? To the master. Okay, so we notice there are actually three groups of characters, or three characters in here, right? There's the master, and then there's the steward. Here says manager, but should say steward. Okay, so just cross out. Don't write in the Good Shepherd Bibles. But if you have your own, you just cross that out and put steward. So there's the master, there's the steward. Who else is in this little snippet? The slaves. And what is the steward supposed to do? What is his job? To manage the slaves by doing what? Giving them their food when? At the proper time. See, that's the discerning, prudent part of this. You don't just, like a cat, put the bowl out and let people come whenever they want, right? There's a method to this madness. So there's the master, the steward, and the slaves. Who does the food come from?
The master.
The master. So the steward is not the owner. That's the number one principle we want to say first right off the bat. The steward is not the owner. The master is the owner. The master gives instructions to the steward, right? And then the steward carries out those instructions, administers the instructions in a loyal and wise way. Why?
That's what a steward does.
Yeah, that's the right answer, because that's what a steward does. Does it sound like he does it out of fear of the master? No.
Out of responsibility.
He's faithful and prudent.
Because he's faithful and prudent, and that's what you
He
do.
wants to effectively do his job.
Exactly right. He wants to effectively do his job and give the slaves what they need, right? They need food to eat. This is not, Xboxes or something. I mean, this is to benefit the slaves. So the goods, so to speak, if I can now turn to economic terms, the goods originate with the master, flow through the steward, and down to the slaves. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
They don't stop at the steward. Right? The master doesn't give the food to the steward, and then the steward sits around and feasts all day. The steward passes the goods along to the slaves. And what is his reward? The steward's reward. More responsibility. No good deed goes unpunished, right? The more you do well, the more you get to do. So he's not enriching himself, even when he's really good at this, right? He's not stopping the flow of goods. They're just more and more and more coming through him or her to the slaves. Does that make sense to you?
He's effectively distributing, neither increasing nor decreasing.
Yes, effectively distributing, he said, effectively distributing, neither increase or decreasing. Now, that doesn't mean that the steward can't take out what he needs, of course, along the way, but his main job is to pass things along to the slaves. Does that make sense to you? Okay, let's look at the next one then. Luke 16, 1 to 2. Luke, we're already there, so that makes it easy.
Excuse me, can I say something about that?
Sure. Can you use the microphone so we can all hear?
Thank you. As you were talking about the master and the steward and the slaves, you mentioned that the food, for example, or whatever thing it might be, is given to the slaves with the benefit of the slaves. But I would say that's a secondary benefit, and the benefit really is for the master. And I might be getting ahead of ourselves here, but otherwise there would be no organization there if it weren't for the benefit of the master.
Yes, okay, because of the condition of slavery.
Correct.
Yeah, that the slaves ultimately are in place to benefit the master.
Yes.
And yes, but when we transfer this to a non-slavery environment, I'm hoping we'll see that things flow through for the benefit of the people who are receiving them.
I would think it would be the same no matter what. Whether it's a slave or an employee would be always for the benefit of, whether it's the corporation or the business owner or what it might be.
And benefits, okay, I'll say this then, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but benefits accrue to the master in various ways,
Correct.
not always economic.
That's true.
Okay, good. Is that okay? Can I go on then, or you want to leave?
No.
Okay. Just making sure. You've already paid, right? Okay, somebody else had their hand up? Yeah.
In relationship to the master, is the steward also a slave here?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
The steward works for the master. And is kind of a higher, like a foreman, right? I mean, still under the master's control, but has responsibility to people under him or her. I keep saying him because obviously in those biblical days it would have been a him, right? But we're going to transfer this eventually to our own lives. Okay? Everybody else okay? Yes? All right. Luke 16, 1 to 2. Now this is a big long story, but these two verses are all we need to make my point. So that's what we're doing. Okay, 16, 1 to 2. Who wants to read? Okay, great. Can you turn the microphone on? Down near the bottom. Mouth with lines coming out.
It may not.
There we go.
Then Jesus said to the disciple, there was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was squandering his property. So he summoned him and said to him, "What is this that I hear about you? Give me an accounting of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer."
Okay. What word or words do you think are relevant in that passage? Manager, again. I don't know why in the world we don't just use the word steward, cross it out, right? Steward. Having issues with whoever translated Luke into English. All right. There was a rich man with a steward, and charges were brought that this man was squandering his property. Anything else in there you see that might be relevant?
Accounting of your management.
Good. Accounting is the word accounting, but management is the word oikonomia. So give me an accounting of your stewardship. Now, I don't know about you, but the first time I heard that, I began to get a little squirm in my seat just a little bit. Because now we're learning we need to be faithful and prudent. We learned that here. What can we add now that we're learning in addition here? Ooh, that we're accountable. And Lutherans start getting very nervous, right? about any kind of accountability. Even though, of course, that's not biblical, but makes us nervous anyway. So we are accountable to whom? The master. We're accountable to the master for our stewardship. Okay. I'm just letting you squirm on that. Right? Okay. Now we're going to move to Galatians 4. One to 2. Galatians 4. Galatians 4, 1 to 2. Readers? A reader? Okay, great.
Now I say that as long as the heir is a child, he differs in no way from a slave, though he is the owner of everything. Instead, he is under the guardians and stewards until the time set by his father.
Wow, the word steward. What translation were you reading from?
HSB, CSB.
CSB?
Yes.
Okay. So it's the second verse. They remain under, he said, guardians and stewards. Some of you have a different word there probably. Trustees, right. So that's the word stewards. Trustees. Some of us in congregations have trustees, don't we? In what context do we normally have trustees?
Endowment.
The endowment is often, right, the board of trustees instead of the board of directors, for example. What else in the congregation? Property is the other one that you frequently find the trustees. Why do you think that is? Why would the endowment and the property committee want to have the title trustee or be assigned the title trustee, whichever?
Financial accountability.
Yeah, there's accountability going on here, right? And they have real property, so to speak, that we could touch, right? They have property, or they have stocks and bonds and so forth, that they're actually accountable for being faithful and prudent with, right? So that, in some ways, is a limiting of the word steward to stuff that we could actually touch, as opposed to a broader sense. Okay? So they remain under guardians and trustees. Okay, the last one in this little subgroup is Romans 16. Romans 16, 23. Oh, I can't wait to tell you about this. Okay, hurry. Romans 16:23. Was that me? Sorry. I didn't do anything. Just standing here. We need a reader. Romans 16:23. Who's there?
Up here. Drift. Boom.
Thank you.
Gaius, whose hospitality I and the whole church here enjoy, sends you his greetings. And Erastus, who is the city's director of public works, and our brothers Quartus send you their greetings. And then I have a verse 24 at the bottom. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with all of you. Amen.
Okay.
This is the NIV.
Yeah, the NIV. Okay. What word do you think in there is the word oikonomos, steward? But the NRSV says treasurer, right? The city treasurer. The NIV says the director of public works. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, the director of public works. So the steward, not of a master's estate, not of a minor's estate, but now of the entire city. This is the city's steward, right? The steward of the city. The oikonomos polou, the steward of the city. What I wanted to tell you was I was in Greece just about 10 days ago, And yeah, it was miserable because they had record snow and ice and record cold. Yeah. So almost the entire itinerary was canceled. Saw almost nothing that was on the itinerary. Very disappointing. But we did, in Corinth, see the Erastus inscription by this same guy, Erastus. It's from the mid-1st century, this inscription. It was found in 1929, but it's from the mid-1st century. They can tell by the language and so forth. So it's this same guy, this Erastus, who was the city treasurer. Isn't that exciting? You don't look too excited. Come on, show me your excited face. Woo! So what happened is I talked to the tour guide about this, who is, of course, Greek and knows a lot about this stuff. And the city treasurer, or the director of public works, the city steward, that's what I'm going to call him, the city steward was an elected position. And so the candidates would spend a lot of their own money on public works, infrastructure, monuments, et cetera, and whoever spent the most on infrastructure for the city won the job as the city steward. That sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? The thinking was, part of the thinking was, that rich people are less likely to steal from the city funds than poor people. Yeah. I didn't get in a conversation with him about that, but yeah. Not sure how it worked out then either. But then the cool thing is, after they served their term as the city steward, they donated some other infrastructure or public monuments, and they had an inscription. And that's what this inscription is from Erastus. And it says, "I, Erastus, steward of the city, offer this pavement," right, pavement, "as gratitude for my service." And I got to stand on it, take a picture of it. And I knew this was coming up. I was so excited to tell you that. Let's see your excited face again. Yay! Okay, good. All right. I didn't bring my pictures yet. I think they're still on my camera, actually. But okay, so these four, we are talking about a steward and stewardship of, I'm going to call it real property. You know that term, real property. Things you could touch or taste or step on, right? The master's estates, food for the slaves, the estate of the minor who is still under trusteeship, the city, whatever it is, it's real property that these people are managing. Real property, food, land, right? Public works, all of that kind of stuff. So these four kind of make a group. I'm going to call it real property. Not real in the sense of unreal, but real in the sense of finance, of real property. Okay, now we're going to turn to another group. Let me make some room here. I'll change colors. And we're going to 1 Corinthians 4, 1-2. Yeah, I'll put them down here. Okay, 1 Corinthians. I was just in Corinth. Did I say that already? Didn't see anything, but I was there. Okay, 1 Corinthians 4, 1-2. Anybody? Come on, don't be bashful. All right, good. Hit the microphone.
Oh, don't stay on.
Well, yell then.
Okay. Think of us in this way as stewards of Christ, as servants of Christ, and stewards of God's mysteries. Moreover, it is required of stewards that they be found trustworthy.
Yikes. This is one of the few places in the New Testament where they actually translate the word as steward. The NRSV, I mean, translates the word as steward. So this time we are stewards of what? If you weren't squirming at being accountable to a estate manager, I hope you're squirming now. Stewards of God's mysteries. Oh my word. That's a heck of a calling, isn't it?
What other translation is God's secret truths?
Secret truths. Yeah, that's one of the questions we could take a lot of time to explore. What are God's mysteries? But yeah.
Is this also saying that stewards are also servants?
Yes, servants of Christ and stewards of God's mysteries. Now this thing I erased over here with the master, the steward, and passing it on, right, to whomever, that still applies. God's mysteries come to the steward, and the steward's job is to pass those on, right? Not to dam up the river, but to let the river flow, to pass on God's mysteries to others. But it's getting a little more serious, would you say, than just food to slaves. Now we're talking about passing on God's mysteries. And this is not just for the ordained, may I say, right? This is everybody. So passing on God's mysteries. And what else about the steward do we learn here? Trustworthy. There we have that. We had faithful and prudent before. Now we have trustworthy. Because, of course, we're going to be accountable. That's always lurking in the background, right? We're going to be accountable to the master. Okay, now we go to 1 Peter 4. That's where those of you with electronic are happy that you just type in 1 Peter. The rest of us are flip through the back trying to find 1 Peter 4, 7 to 11. I got to tell you, as a biblical scholar, that flip that you're doing there is the best sound in the world. It's the best sound in the world to hear people flipping the pages of their Bible. It just doesn't get any better than that. So could you, those of you that have real Bibles, could you please do that loudly? One time I was in class and I said that, and the guy sitting right here next to me had an electronic version, but he turned on some kind of sound that made it sound like it was flipping the pages. So when I would call out something to look up, you could hear his computer going whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. It was really cool. Okay, 1 Peter. I got to find 1 Peter here. 1 Peter is back here in the back somewhere. 1 Peter, hello, where are you? I'm just flipping the pages because I like to. Okay, 1 Peter 4, what did I say? 7 to 11. Okay. Who's got it? Yeah, okay, good. I see your hand over the video camera. Great.
The end of all things is near. Therefore be serious and discipline yourself for the sake of your prayers. Above all, maintain constant love for one another, for love covers a multitude of sins. Be hospitable to one another without complaining, like good stewards of the manifold grace of God. Serve one another with whatever gift each of you has received. Whoever speaks must do so as one speaking the very words of God. Whoever serves must do so with the strength that God supplies, so that God may be glorified in all things through Jesus Christ. To him belong the glory and the power forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. Yeah. So verse 10 is what we're particularly interested in here. She read the translation steward again, thank goodness. The NRSV has come through for us. Good stewards of what? Gosh. God's manifold grace. What does that mean? What does the word manifold mean? Much. Not like a manifold on a car. Like an adjective manifold. What else does it mean besides much? Okay, abundant, what else?
Variety.
Variety, that's, somebody over here said variety. That's the key to manifold is different than abundant, because manifold has a variety, right? That's the key distinction here. And grace, well, we know what that is, right? Unconditional love of God for all. So God's variety and abundant love, unconditional love for all. That's what we're stewarding. Wow. Are you squirming yet? I am, and I'm standing up. Yeah, God's manifold grace. And what is the purpose of being, now this time we get just the adjective good, okay? We're supposed to be good at this. What is the purpose of being good at this? Why are we good stewards?
To serve one another.
Good, to serve one another. To serve one another. So again, we've got, I'm going to put this back up here, master, steward, and others, I'll just call them, right? So we know something about God's abundant variety of unconditional love for all, and we're supposed to be serving other people with that knowledge and service. And look at the very next part of that verse. With whatever gift each of you, what? Has received. Does it say will receive? No, it says has, we could throw the word already, received. Every single person has already received a gift for service. Of course, the trick is figuring out what that is. But this verse says every single person has already received a gift, and that gift is to be used in the service of proclaiming God's abundant variety of unconditional love for all. Wow. Now that, people would be on a stewardship committee if that were our task, right? Okay, one more in this group, Titus. There's another one we have to go searching for. Titus 1:7. Titus. He's back here near Peter somewhere. No, maybe not.
We've all found it. We're just flipping pages for you.
Yeah, thank you. That's very generous. If I were a New Testament scholar, I'd know where Titus is. But since I'm an Old Testament scholar, but I've got it written here. So oh, here it is, Titus 1:7. Volunteer, please. Somebody who's found it.
I'll read it.
Okay, thanks.
For a bishop, as God's stewards, must be blameless. He must not be arrogant or quick-tempered or addicted to wine or violent or greedy for gain.
Yeah, go ahead and read the next verse too, 8.
He must be hospitable, a lover of goodness, prudent, upright, devout, and self-control.
There you go. So here we find out that a bishop, an overseer, an episcopate, right, in those days, the bishop is God's steward in a particular way. And then all these qualities that need to be in place for someone to be the overseer and be an example for the flock, right? An example of godly living. And so you had the whole list of things there that somebody needs to be. Okay, now what has happened here is these 4 instances were about what I call real property, right? Estates and food and investments and city public infrastructure and so forth. But now these 3 have basically gone up a notch, if you follow me here, into God's property, as it were. In other words, we've made the move from a master who's a person and owns things to a master who is God and who owns the mysteries and manifold grace and so forth, the right to appoint people to be the bishop, right? Does that make sense to you? That we've taken the example on earth, basically, and moved it to heavenly things, right? God is the one who has the mysteries and the manifold grace, and now the stewards are responsible for administering that. Does that make sense? Okay. You willing to stay for another group? Okay. The third group gets really interesting. So we'll use red for them. 1 Corinthians 9, 15 to 18. First Corinthians. Oh, Corinthians. I was just there in Corinth. Did I mention that? It was freezing cold and snowing. But I have a picture of the Erastus inscription. Did I mention that? 1 Corinthians 9, 15 to 18. Okay, now this gets a little harder in terms of picking out the words. Who's got 1 Corinthians 9? Even though you weren't in Corinth, like I was, but... Somebody, okay.
15 through 18. But I have made no use in any of these rights, nor am I writing this, that these may be applied in my case. Indeed, I would rather that do that. No one will deprive me of my ground for boasting. If I proclaim the gospel, this gives me no ground for boasting, for an obligation is laid on me, and woe to me if I do not proclaim the gospel. For if I do this of my own will, I have a reward, but if not of my own will, I am entrusted with a commission. What then is this my reward? Just this, that in my proclamation I may make the gospel free of charge, so as not to make full use of my rights in the gospel.
Okay, I told you it's getting a little harder to find the word stewardship or steward. Anybody want to guess? Entrusted with a commission is the right phrase, but we're looking for a noun.
Obligation.
No, it's not obligation. Entrusted with a commission is the right phrase. Which of those words is a noun? Commission. Commission. I am entrusted with a stewardship. That's the word stewardship. If I do this of my own will, I have a reward. But if not of my own will, I am entrusted with a stewardship. Wow. A stewardship to do what? Proclaim the gospel. Exactly right. Proclaim the gospel. Paul feels as if he is, this stewardship of proclaiming the gospel has been laid on him by God, of course, and therefore he's saying it's not of his own will, but something that God laid on him, or entrusted to him, which is even better than being, when I say laid on, it sounds like a burden, right? But to be entrusted with the stewardship of proclaiming the gospel. That's what this is about. Okay, Ephesians 1. 5 to 10. Ephesians. Flip, flip, flip. Boy, that's the best sound in the world. Somebody there? Is anybody out there?
Yeah.
We can have repeat readers. We just need somebody to read.
Sure. And I switched to the NRSV this time for you.
Okay, thank you.
He destined us for adoption as his children through Jesus Christ, according to the good pleasure of his will, to the praise of his glorious grace that he freely bestowed on us in the Beloved. In him we have redemption through his blood for the forgiveness of our trespasses, according to the riches of his grace. How many will we read? Oh, through 10. All right, sorry. That he lavished on us with all wisdom and insight. He has made known to us the mystery of his will, according to his good pleasure that he set forth in Christ as a plan for the fullness of time to gather up all things in him, things in heaven and things on earth.
Okay, who is the he in that passage? God. Okay, good. So notice, first of all, how many times God is the subject and we are the receiving object. God did this, God did that, God did the other, God did this, God did that, God did the other, right? Okay, what word do you think would be stewardship or steward? This is getting harder. Yeah?
King James uses dispensation.
Where?
10, verse 10.
Verse 10. Okay, read us that then.
That in the dispensation of the fullness of times, he might gather together in one all things in Christ.
Yeah, good. The word in here that's actually the word stewardship is in the NRSV is the word plan in verse 10. Plan. So God has made known to us the mystery, there's that word again, right? The mystery of his will, of God's will, according to his good pleasure that he set forth in Christ, as a stewardship for the fullness of time, to gather up all things in God, things in heaven and things on earth. What in the heck could that mean? God, this passage is telling us that God has a stewardship idea in mind for the fullness of time, of how things unfold, when things unfold, where things unfold, right? The fullness of time is under God's stewardship. And the end result of that stewardship is to gather up all things into God's self. That's an amazing thought, isn't it? I mean, we think about it, I think. It's not a new thought to us, but we don't usually think of that in terms of stewardship, do we? That God is actually stewarding the fullness of time. And if God is the steward, God is the God and also the steward, that means we're down here, right, as the others, as our benefit, that God is doing all of this for the benefit of creation. Does that make sense to you? This is getting kind of esoteric, I know. But it's interesting that that's the word stewardship. God's stewardship of the fullness of time. Okay, still in Ephesians 3, 7 to 10. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed one. Ephesians 3, 1 to 4. Ephesians 3, we're already there. 1 to 4. Somebody, yeah.
This is the reason that I, Paul, am a prisoner for Christ Jesus for the sake of you Gentiles. For surely you have already heard of the commission of God's grace that was given me for you, and how the mystery was made known to me by revelation, as I wrote above in a few words, a reading of which will enable you to perceive my understanding of the mystery of Christ.
Paul wrote in a few words, really? Paul never wrote anything in a few words. Okay, what do you think is the word in there that we're looking at today? Commission, right, you're getting good at this now. You have heard of the stewardship of God's grace. We're back to this group over here. Paul is talking about the stewardship of God's grace that was given me, Paul, for what purpose? For you. For you. You see, here's the conduit again, right? The grace, God's grace was given to Paul for you, the Ephesians. And the mystery was made known, a reading of which will enable you to perceive my understanding of the mystery of Christ. So again, he's the steward of this mystery of Christ and God's grace for the purpose of informing you and bringing you to know Jesus. Does that make sense to you? Okay. Ephesians 3, 7 to 10.
I'll read.
Thank you.
Of this gospel I have become a servant according to the gift of God's grace that was given me by the working of his power. Although I am the very least of all saints, this grace was given to me to bring to the Gentiles the news of the boundless riches of Christ, and to make everyone see what is the plan of mystery hidden for ages in God who created all things, so that through the church the wisdom of God in its rich variety might now be known to the rulers and authorities in the heavenly places.
Okay. We're seeing some familiar themes, right? What is the word here we're looking at?
Servant.
No, servant is the word doulos, regular word for servant.
In the NIV, is there administration?
Where?
And to make plain to everyone the administration of this mystery.
Yes, it's in verse 9. To make everyone see what is the stewardship of the mystery hidden for ages in God. So again, it's this big notion of stewardship of mystery and grace and the fullness of time, the plan that God is invoking to bring about the kingdom. It's that stewardship of that, which is a huge concept, right? Okay, two more, and then we're going to wrap this thing together. Colossians 1. (24 to 26). Colossians. Colossians 1. Who's there?
What are the verses again?
24 to 26. Yeah, back in the back. Thank you.
Okay, it is working. Now I rejoice in what was suffered for you, and I fill up in my flesh what is still lacking in regard to Christ's afflictions, for the sake of his body, which is the church. I have become its servant by the commission God gave me to present to you the word of God in its fullness, the mystery that has been kept hidden for ages and generations, but is now disclosed to the saints.
Excellent. What word do we think is at use here?
Commission.
Commission, again, right? Paul is talking about God's stewardship of the mystery and the plan for the ages, right? This mystery, that fullness of time, all of that. Paul, or whomever wrote this, became the church's servant according to God's stewardship. Okay, and finally, 1 Timothy 1, 3 to 4. First Timothy 1. Okay, who's there? 3 and 4. Yeah, good, thanks.
I urge you, as I...
There you go.
Okay. I urge you, as I did when I was on my way to Macedonia, to remain in Ephesus, so that you may instruct certain people not to teach any different doctrine, and not to occupy themselves with myths and endless genealogies that promote speculation, rather than the divine training that is known by faith.
Any word in there jump out as stewardship? Training. It's the word training. It's very strange. There's a note in the NRSV that says, or plan. We should have another note that says, it really is stewardship. The divine stewardship that is known by faith. So what you have before you here are all of the uses of the word oikonomia, stewardship, or oikonomos, steward, in the New Testament. There are 13 of them. I mean, there's several in this verse, but you get the idea. 4 are about real property, things humans are administering, right? 3 are about God's property, God's mysteries, God's grace, manifold grace, right? And 7 of the 13, let's see, are there any math majors in the room? More than half. More than half of the use of the word stewardship is about God's stewardship of all creation, of time and space, plans, people chosen for this and that to make known the gospel of Jesus Christ for all the world. That's what these in red are about. Now let me tell you, I have one other thing to say before we break. Those are all the New Testament references. Of course, the word is used outside of the New Testament in classical Greek writings. Like I told you about the Erastus inscription. Did I tell you about that? I was in Corinth last week. How was the weather? The weather was terrible. Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, so there in that Erastus inscription, it said the oikonomos of the city. So it obviously is used outside of the Bible. But 2 ways that the word oikonomia, or stewardship, was primarily used in the ancient classical Greek world one was to talk about the solar system. It was an oikonomia of the solar system. The way the planets move, the way the stars move. They noticed, of course, the cycles that happened from season to season and so forth. So that entire system was called oikonomia. And the other example that's shown over and over again in classical Greek writings is the system of the human body. The way the bones and the tendons and the blood circulation and all that stuff work together, right, to make a human body. That was called an oikonomia. Now, of course, in English, oikonomia comes over, right, as it used to be this. Right, economy just comes directly over from, if you wrote down the word oikonomia earlier, you see that. And then at some point, this was dropped. So now it's just economy. In secular society and in the church, we have narrowed the understanding of stewardship, oikonomia, economy, to mean money. That's not what it means. It's a broad, expansive definition, as you can see from these passages. More than half of them have nothing to do with money. In some ways, we could say only these 4 have anything to do with money, which of course wasn't operable back then, but you get my point. Here we are stewards of God's manifold grace and mysteries. Doesn't have anything to do with money. And all of these don't have anything to do with money. So my definition of stewardship is the arrangement of the parts to benefit all creation. If God is being the steward, then it's God's arrangement of the parts to benefit all creation. If we are being the stewards, then we're arranging the parts that we have any control over. We're arranging the parts to benefit all creation. The last part of that is just as important as the first part, because all of these examples, it was for the sake of others. Now granted, we could go back to slavery and say that benefits the master. But the point is, the steward is the middleman, so to speak, right? The steward is the one who receives the gifts from the master and then passes them on, like a conduit. The steward is not the dam. Do you get what I mean? The steward is the conduit, moving things out to benefit all creation. Okay, let's take a break, and then we'll come back in 10, 15 minutes to talk about how stewardship connects with mission. Does that sound good? Okay, great. Thanks for staying.